Mr. Kumba, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Tell us about STEM.
So STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's an acronym that was created by the National Science Foundation here in the US because scientific fields have subspecialties. Broadly speaking, people say science, but under science you have areas that deal with engineering, construction, practical items, then technology that comes out of the science, and you have mathematics that underlies all of the sciences. So just to compartmentalize their own budgeting and prioritizing of programming, they use the word STEM to segment those. But together, by saying STEM, they mean all the fields that have to do with science, engineering, technology, and the creation of scientific knowledge. In other parts of the world, Europe for example, they will say STI, science, technology, and innovation. Or just S&T. So in Africa, like at the African Union, you have a Commission for Science and Technology. And many of our ministries in Africa, like Nigeria, you have Ministry of Science and Technology, separate from higher education. So what you call science and technology is what we call here STEM. So either way, science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
So in other words, STEM would have a direct impact on governance in Africa.
The Constituency for Africa is a group that is about 20 to 25 years old now, and they have been the foremost association that has advocated and leveraged and organized resources to support Africa from the US side. So there are many people at the White House or through successive US governments that want to do Africa policy. State Department wants to do Africa policy. Congress wants to pass laws that regard Africa. Civil society, people just donate money to support work in Africa. So there's a swelling of goodwill, both in public, private, and public sectors that want to support Africa. Many of them are ill-informed about Africa. Many are very unorganized about Africa. So Constituency for Africa came up to represent a voice that would better inform all these groups that want to do good for Africa, better educate them, and even better organize them to better target their resourcefulness. So for this many 20 to 25 years, they have been advocating for Africa in the halls of power and society. The major work that has been done towards Africa from here, one, things like AGOA, and I'm sure you know about AGOA in Nigeria. It facilitated the export of local products from Nigeria coming here. They are behind that. They propose it to the then government. PEPFAR, quote unquote, the president's emergency fund for AIDS research in Africa, that was done by President George Bush. That idea and the work earlier came from CFA. That there was an AIDS crisis in Africa, the US should respond in a major way. That idea came from CFA. If you look at this recent President Summit I just held a few months ago, the proposal came first of all from CFA to the White House once Obama got elected. So this is what you should do to engage Africa majorly. So there has been a big force in advocating for Africa from the US. Now, after all these years of work, we at CFA, we realized that ultimately what makes some countries developed and some not developed is how much they can master and use science for their own infrastructure development. Every country has its own wars. Every country has its own political problems. Every country has its own, in Nigeria you call it wahala, everywhere, right? But what makes Africa different from Europe? What makes Japan different from Nigeria? It is that Japan and European countries, so-called developed countries, they've developed enough mastery of science and technology, STEM subjects and fields, to be able to run their own economy, process their own raw materials to finished product before they sell it. Unlike us in Africa, who still sell without any added value. They're able to handle their own environment and understand environmental factors on migration and economies and health. The Ebola crisis, for example, what is the problem with Ebola? It's not so much that it came up, but it's that the countries couldn't support it, they couldn't contain it. That's capacity, the knowledge of science, labs to do the research to isolate the disease, the medical infrastructure, number of doctors. The scientific infrastructure in the country is not strong enough. So what distinguishes developed from developed countries, Africa from the rest of the world, is their scientific capacity, broadly speaking. And so CFA has identified this scientific capacity as the next major front where if we want to make a strong impact on Africa from this side of the Atlantic, then we should advocate and support African development in that light. And it so happens that Africa too is at a crossroads in that area. So from independence, from the time of, say, Azikiwe in Nigeria and Awolowo, the priority for them at independence was how to run offices. It had been run by Lugard and his descendants for a long time. And when they got independence, the offices were still vacant. They didn't have enough trained Nigerians to run the machinery of government from all the echelons of government. So the priority for them at that time, the leadership of Nigeria, like all of the rest of Africa, was about training lawyers, training political scientists, economists to decide on the economy. The debate was about socialism or capitalism at that time of independence, moving forward. But after 50 years of independence, you've had these difficulties. Nigeria has gone through its transitions, leadership transitions. Those to us, they are periods where Africa tries to consolidate its independence. Because at independence, there were forces that reacted towards it. And so back and forth, recently you've had 3 or 4 presidents transition democratically. There is stability. So after 50 years of focusing on training, one, the manpower to run the government, the public sector, that's part of why the Nigerian public sector is still very heavy in the economy, like other countries in Africa, Cameroon being one. You know, the government is the biggest employer. Everything is government, right? Because they were the biggest force. The emphasis of it has been on governance so far for 50 years. But ultimately, what Africa is moving towards on its own is say we have enough governance. We need now the science and technology to run our system. They're shifting gear. They're steering their shift towards scientific competencies. And we think that from this side of the Atlantic, we should be complementing their own agenda in that light. If you look at Nigerian universities, I've worked closely with the National University Commission and some of my colleagues at Nigerian scientific institutions. The emphasis now is on scientific capacity. The World Bank recently launched a project to set up centers of excellence in Africa. 10 of them out of 20 in West and Central Africa went to Nigeria alone. That's how much Nigeria is putting on science and technology. And those were loans from the World Bank at $8 million per center, times 10, 80 million. When Mandela came out of prison and became president of South Africa, one of his agenda items was to promote education for Africa. One of the things I put on the table was we need scientific knowledge. The first center of that was created where? In Nigeria, at Abuja, Oust. It's taken a long time, but it's coming. So that's how much Nigerian leadership itself has been moving its own priorities towards scientific capacity. They are looking at how much to add value to their extractive products before they sell it to market. The oil industry, the mineral industry, just derivatives. After you sell the oil, the waste of it, it can furnish a pharmaceutical industry, medical industry. How do you do that? Agriculture, how do you add value and not waste food on the market the way we do it? Preservation from market. Can Nigeria be the powerhouse that would actually create the mega agricultural industry that will serve West Africa? It needs scientific knowledge to do all of that.
So how will this work? Would you have scientists coming from the US going to Africa to train people, or would you take people from Africa to the US to have them trained?
So here's what we envision. For a country like Nigeria or other African countries, the imbalance between their level of technical development and the West is quite significant. And it so happens that America is still the #1 scientific country in the world. And here we are. So the model is to look for resources to partner US higher education, generally speaking, and their scientific research centers with Nigerian research centers. So you have these centers of excellence that have been created in Nigeria, but who will teach there? Who assists them with the lab work? Who are the professors that would support training and doctoral research? Maybe American professors can help. Maybe Nigerians here who want to go back to Nigeria and support it can be supported to go help. The diaspora, not only Nigerian, but the African American diaspora, generally speaking. So it's about generating resources in the US. The US, again, from the White House to Congress to the State Department to civil society, they want to do goodwill for Africa. We want to advocate to them, to turn some of that goodwill towards scientific knowledge for Africa. So instead of sending money, say, for poverty alleviation, how do you alleviate poverty? Train their scientists. We want to make the case that in that policy arena, the priority, at least one of the top ones, should be on scientific development and partner U.S. science altogether with Nigerian science or with African science, so that Africans can have the international context which to grow upon. Let me make the point that the World Bank Centers of Excellence that Nigeria just had 10 of them. I was one of the evaluators. The strongest center was one that had a partnership with Harvard. The people who wrote the proposal, their partners was Harvard, Redeemer University, right? But what made them number one? An international partnership with a number one university. So you want to create avenues or resources to create such partnerships at a larger scale. Most Nigerian universities, say Ibadan used to be the pride of Nigeria for a long time. Well, after all the crisis over time, they lost some momentum. Maybe we should look for ways to partner MIT, at least on the scientific side, with Ibadan, maybe my school, Michigan. So it's about generating resources. When you say these things, science is not like politics. To advocate for science is not like advocate for politics or for social change.
But you know, that's the problem, trying to explain the technicality of it all to Africa.
So the way we see it, I'm a mathematician by background. It's not about explaining this to everybody on the street to understand what we're doing. It's to work with the policymakers and the university infrastructure system, because they're the ones who do it. They're the ones who train, their curriculum, their pedagogy, how they deliver lessons. The lab work, the infrastructure. Does Nigeria have any major research equipment that can give it international standards? Or if it doesn't have it, how does it become a major research producer in the world? So our goal here is not so much to speak with everybody, but to speak with those who make policy, who are already working on pushing scientific capacity, competencies, as the next thing that Nigeria needs for its development, or Africa as a whole. I say Nigeria because I'm talking to a Nigerian audience here, but broadly across the continent. South Africa now has a square kilometer array project, the premier telescope in the world. South Africa is part of it. It's an African country. Can Nigeria partner with them in terms of South-South collaboration? And the way to do that, the money to support the faculty, to pay for the scholarship for students, to build the infrastructure. There's always goodwill coming. We just want from here to advocate and through policy and organize the diaspora or the goodwill people. When I say diaspora, it's not exclusive. There are many Americans who want to support Africa in some ways. Let them come and support it in science. We think that's the next frontier for Africa's development. After 50 years of consolidating governance, let's look now at scientific capacity so we can run our own economies on our own self. That's sustainable development. We don't want things where the goodwill from America or from elsewhere in the world brings us finished goods, produce goods outside, we consume. At the end of the day, we're still lacking. We want to be empowered to produce our own goods, run our own machinery, run our own infrastructure by ourselves. So how do I explain it to people? Talk to the policy people. It's a policy issue. It's not the average person go to any university in Nigeria. Not everybody studies mathematics or engineering or science. I think math is even fewer people. They're the ones I need to talk to. Their faculty, our colleagues there, the National University Commission, the Association of Mathematical Sciences, the NMC in Abuja, National Maths Center, Professor Sholarin Adewale, he's a colleague. They're the ones that we want to talk to. Deremi Kuku, he's a strong Nigerian mathematician. They're the ones that we need to talk with because they make the policy, and through them, things go down into the system.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Kumba.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Continuously improving ties between the U.S. and Africa. Well, that's the next frontier. Thanks for watching Diplomatic Channel this week. I am Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.